This is Performance Anxiety on the Pantheon Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mark. And I've got a great episode of side projects here. Michael Gira of Swans returns to talk about their latest album, The Beggar. Swans never got to tour their last album, Leaving Meaning. So The Beggar, while not a continuation of Leaving Meaning, does have some connections to it. It also means that Swans, who are not known for looking back, reminiscing, and playing older songs from their back catalog, will be playing music from Leaving Meaning and The Beggar this tour, plus possibly a new song or two. Michael has not only created another powerhouse of an album, but he also threw me for a loop when I read the credits and realized that there are a bunch of podcast guests on it, like Dana Schechter, Lucy Kruger, and Laura Carbona. Michael discusses how he met Lucy and Laura and how he visualizes new music and who he invites to participate on the albums. Speaking of writing, he also tells me why repetition is important to him and that the isolation of COVID may have ruined his touring plans, but it really didn't change his writing style at all. What did influence the album, though, was the sequencing. Sequencing was the spark that caused him to write the epic track, The Beggar Lover. And I wrap everything in a nice bow by messing up the questions I have for him about the album cover art. You'll see what I mean. To order the album from younggodrecords.com or Bandcamp, follow Swans at Swans_official on Instagram. Follow us at PerformanceANX on Instagram and Twitter. Reach out there or the performanceanxietypod@gmail.com. Coffee from ko-fi.com/performanceanxiety is always appreciated. And merch is available at performanceanx.threadless.com. And now I present Michael Gira on Swans The Beggar on Performance Anxiety, part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. I think we got a little bit of a lag here for a second, so I'm going to try to be patient when I speak.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think it's just the connection.
Yeah, my internet is from 1970 or something here. It's really slow.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all.
Have we spoken before?
Yes, we have. When Leaving Meaning came out, it's actually one of my favorite episodes, because we were having a similar issue with internet, and you just ended up calling me on your phone, stepping outside in the middle of December and doing the entire interview outside.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it was incredibly memorable for me because I thought that was wonderful. I was so blown away that you would do something like that for my little podcast. It was just amazing. So I will thank you again for doing that. It was wonderful.
No problem.
It's also one of my most downloaded and listened to podcast episodes. So thank you again.
Oh, that's great. One thing I will say is that I might be particularly inarticulate because I really haven't done an interview since the time of Leaving Meaning, and I don't really speak to people much. So it's a muscle I don't exercise.
No problem. I have trouble speaking just every day, so we match up nicely.
Yeah.
There's so many things I wanted to ask you, but I guess we'll start with this. You and Swans are not an entity together as a whole that really looks back on things. Leaving Meaning was released, and the pandemic kind of killed the tour plans. Did you have a band prepared and assembled and ready to go on tour before everything got shut down?
Oh, indeed. We had a whole world tour booked, basically.
Wow.
Then we started canceling, and we had no choice. We canceled, and then we rescheduled, I think 3 times. And finally, I just gave up in despair and just decided that it was not never, but it was not going to happen in the foreseeable future. So what I did then was just what I do. I just began to write songs, and I thought, well, at some point I'll record these and then tour and do what I do. Right. The strangest thing is for me is that I was just reflecting on this, is that since, I guess, 1983, so 40 years, my life has been organized around the next record or a tour or rehearsals constantly. So there's always been this urgency about things to get things done so that I could go out and tour, or get things, right, so that I could go in the studio. And then when the studio's done, then plan the tour. And it's just been this constant cycle for 40 years. And then suddenly that was removed. Now, I always had the perhaps mistaken notion that I was pretty much autonomous. I didn't need anybody or anything.
Right.
But, I could always just write, which is another thing I did. I finished compiling this book that I put out, but that's just not enough. And I realized how dependent I am on this process and on other people in particular. Okay. Perhaps I should have been a visual artist, a painter, or a writer, so that, I truly would be autonomous. But unfortunately, I've chosen something that requires social interaction. So it was like really like being sucked down the drain. But it's, people experienced much worse. I didn't lose anybody close to COVID. And although I contracted the disease, it wasn't as terrible for me as it could have been. So.
Oh, that's good. I had a similar experience with it. Fortunately and unfortunately, it's a very minor case. So we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Before you skip over this ad, give me 1 minute. Like most podcasts, I pick sponsors carefully, and I use the products that advertise here. Pure Spectrum CBD is a product that has been really beneficial for me. They have a wide variety of great products that can be used on a daily or as needed basis. I've been using the tincture every day, and it's been wonderful for easing anxiety. And I absolutely love the isolate. I use it instead of acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and it's worked so well for the relief of aches and pains. They also have soaks, lotions, salves, gummies, and more, plus an entire line for fitness recovery. They even have products for your pets. See everything they offer at purespectrumcbd.com. And if you have questions, they're there to help. They helped me when I had no idea where to start. After you fill your cart, use code PerformanceANX for 15% off your purchase. Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD, Pure Spectrum CBD. At what point, or maybe it's better to ask, was it difficult to put Leaving Meaning down and not tour and support the album and move on?
Well, I mean, in the sense that, like I say, it was, that had been part of the process. Okay, the record's written, now I'm going to put a tour together.
Yeah. And
that suddenly that aspect was taken away. Although normally when Swans tours, it's very light on the recent record, and it's more on new material. But that hasn't been the case in the very recent past. So I forget where I was with that. But anyway, so I started writing songs, and now we're going to tour, unless some other calamity occurs.
Oh, God forbid, yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
So when you're touring...
I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you tour, this upcoming tour that will hopefully happen, will that be along the same lines, or will it be newer music since recording The Beggar, or will it be anything from Leaving Meaning and The Beggar? Or do you even have that set yet?
Oh, well, I have a set list I've compiled.
Okay.
And so far, the songs that we're going to be performing, and we haven't started rehearsing yet, but so far the songs that I think we're going to be performing are from The Beggar and from Leaving Meaning. And there's a new song, and I'm hoping to have another new song or two by the time that we tour, but you never know these days. I'm not as loquacious as I once might have been.
Well, I've had a chance to listen to The Beggar, and not surprisingly, it blows me away. And one of the things that I really loved about it was the use of musicians that I've admired for years beyond the core group of Swans that's on the album. You're using people that have been guests on the podcast that I just have admired for years, like Dana Schechter, who was part of Angels of Light and slated to be on the tour that never was. But you've also used for some background vocals one of my favorite singers of all time, Lucy Kruger and Laura Carbona.
Oh, that's great.
How did you come across Lucy and Laura and incorporate them into the new Swans album?
Well, like most things in my world, it seems to be just chance. But Christoph, our guitar player, or slide guitar player, lives in Berlin, and he went to see Lucy Kruger perform. And I think we were there. I'm not sure what we were recording, basic tracks or something when he went. And he remarked upon the fact that the harmonies were really beautiful. And I think Laura was on stage harmonizing with Lucy as well. And he met them backstage, and it turns out that they appreciated the music of Swans. So I said, oh, well, obviously at a stage down the road, we're going to need a lot of background vocals, as I usually do.
Right.
And so I asked them. And so he asked them, and they came to the studio. And they were fine ladies, and they did a great job.
Oh, yeah, they're wonderful.
Dana, as you mentioned, was in Angels of Light, so I've known her for decades now. And yeah, I'm looking forward to rehearsing live. And she plays one of the basses on this lineup. Chris Prodika plays another bass, so there's two bass players. They both play other instruments as well, so I'm not certain that they're going to be playing two basses at the same time always, but
okay,
we'll see.
One of the other things that I've noticed about this album and several of the other Swans albums, repetition plays a big part in the writing and the performing. Whether it can be musical, like that just insane, bludgeoning, incredible riff that I absolutely love in The Glowing Man. Even in the new album, The Parasite, vocally, like "Come to Me, Feed on Me." Is that conscious? Is there a specific purpose that you use repetition?
Well, I have a proclivity for it. So it's not an intellectual decision. It's just sort of what I gravitate towards. I would say that it feels bogus to change. It just seems artificial sometimes to change chords, whereas there's already so much nuance and worlds to discover within that chord. But I was just looking through, you sent me the questions in advance, and I was looking through the songs on the record, and I realized that many of them have several chords, as a matter of fact. So it's not always the case, but I do like to have a drone or a thread that runs through everything to provide a context for the chords. I don't know where that inclination comes from. Maybe it's from a kind of love of Indian music or drone-based experimental music. It might come from there. But yeah, I guess I lean towards repetition. But repetition kind of, to me, implies something mechanical, whereas that's not what interests me at all.
How worked out and fleshed out are the songs before you bring them to the band? And I know that band members fluctuate from album to album, or they can fluctuate from album to album, I guess I should say. Does that influence the members that you assemble for each album and each version of Swans?
Well, I write, sitting here right at this desk I'm talking to you from, I just pick up my acoustic guitar and I write the songs. So the songs are written and I can perform them solo if I choose, which I just did a solo tour recently performing many of the songs from The Beggar. So they're constructed. But of course, when I work with other musicians, all of whom are much more skilled technically than I am, I want to leave room for them to bring life to it and to have the material expand accordingly. And I always want to leave things open to chance and mistakes and just to being in the moment. So I choose the musicians not based on their tremendous technical prowess, although several of them do possess that, but I choose them based on kind of who they are as individuals, their aura, so to speak, and how it will feel performing this music. I kind of picture this person playing the music with me, and do I feel good about that? And if I do, then I choose that person. I don't want just some schmo coming in and laying down some hot licks, you know. Right. It has to be a psychic connection, and we try to make something true and urgent happen with the music, and that's incredibly important to me.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. The music on The Beggar is just as incredible as your last several albums, but you've got the title, well, I guess the title track, the Beggar Lover, that is just shy of 44 minutes long. Is that the longest studio piece in the Swans catalog?
I do not believe so. That takes some explaining. The Beggar Lover, I mean, there's the song The Beggar, which is something that we played in the studio together. But The Beggar Lover is the reason the lover thing is there is because that's a reference to an album I did in, what was it, 98, something like that, 99, called The Body Lovers. And that came out of the previous album, Soundtracks for the Blind, where I was working with these archives and troves of material that I had accrued over years. And I decided I would cannibalize that material and forge a kind of soundtrack out of it. And that's what I did with The Body Lovers and with Soundtracks for the Blind. With Soundtracks for the Blind, there was a lot of traditional musician performances that were recorded in the studio, but a lot of it also was pre-recorded things that I had made for other records or found sounds that I had accrued or samples that I used a lot at the time. Okay. But on this one, I raided the archives from going a couple records back and recorded at home lots of different things, and then also recorded over those things. And it's mainly I just threw a huge amount of material into the computer with the wonderful engineer I work with, Ingo Kraus. And we just started, if you can imagine being in kind of a pond filled with cottage cheese, we just started wading through it and tried to like make a shape out of it. And that's how that was construed. That's the most amazing description ever. Sculpting cottage cheese. But, you know, so there are previous grooves that had already been extant from other records and mixed in with subsequent records or things that I did just now in the studio. And I made this kind of, it's meant to be like a soundtrack for a film that doesn't exist. Oh, interesting. I love how you brought back the lyrics to Leaving Meaning in one section with a... Yeah, that's the vocal tracks from the song Leaving Meaning, and they just serendipitously worked over this other groove that I just played them, and they were actually not the same chord. They're in the same key, I guess, technically. Although don't ask me what key that is. See it, but not see it. I can feel it, but not keep it. they just fit. And I thought, oh, that's good. And I liked that conjunction very much. And you had asked in your previous questions that you gave me whether we're going to perform that version live, and we're going to try. We'll see what happens.
Wow.
You know, as long as it feels authentic to play it that way, we will. But
okay,
we'll see. But so that's how that was constructed. It wasn't like I composed that whole thing and had musicians play it. It worked through kind of wrestling with the sounds and making this soundtrack out of them.
And it's amazing, and I love that it butts right up to the Memorious, which every Swans album to me has there's always seems to be one track that just is striking to me. And on the last album, it was the title track, Leaving Meaning. I listened to it constantly. To this day, it's still in my car playing all the time. And the Memorious is that track on this album for me. It's just an amazing track. It's got this tension in it that I love, and maybe something a little unsettling with it sounds like a child's voice sampling. It's just a really intense song that just grabs me.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks.
Was that it kind of, and one of the things I like is that it just kind of flows from the Beggar Lover into the song. Is it set up that way? I mean, when you were working on the Beggar Lover, did you have the Memorious written already? Was it constructed that way, or is that just something that happened, that worked out?
No, the Beggar Lover was done after the main body of the record was finished.
Oh, okay.
And then it was kind of an arduous process, but the sequencing for the vinyl was done, God, I don't know, 10 months ago or something.
Oh, wow.
Just forever, a long time ago, because vinyl, the turnover for vinyl is so incredibly long now.
Yeah.
So I had to mix the record and then just turn it in right away, master it and send it in. And on listening to the sequence of the vinyl, I was increasingly unsatisfied. So I started thinking about the digital and CD versions and sequencing as what would be the main way to listen to the record if you listen to it digitally. And then I listened to that and I thought, well, it needs something else. So that's why I decided to make the the Beggar Lover.
Oh.
Because well, there would be time digitally, of course, whereas you're limited with LPs. We can't afford to make triple LPs anymore. So, we did at one point, but I just can't do it anymore. So I just decided to do this, and that's how that occurred. Now, the song, The Memorious, lyrically, that's a reference, I guess, or a little nod to my favorite writer of fiction, Jorge Luis Borges. And one of my favorite stories by him is entitled, well, depending on the translation, but it's originally it was translated as Funes the Memorious. And it's a great story about this young man in Argentina who's riding on his horse, I guess, and he falls, and the effect of the fall is such that he remembers everything. He remembers every single nuance of every second.
Oh, wow.
He remembers the sound of the wind from 20 years ago. He remembers the crinkling of the leaves as the wind hit those leaves. He remembers exactly what he was thinking at that moment. He remembers the feel of his breakfast in his stomach. He remembers every single thing from every second from his life. and of course, he loses his mind.
Yeah.
But with me, it's exactly the opposite, and it always has been. It's not senility, I hope, but I am the opposite. I hardly ever remember anything. So this song was a struggle to remember certain specific instances from my life, fictionalized, of course, because I don't really care about my biography per se in a song. It doesn't matter. But I was just trying to remember things, and so I started writing things down as memory, as a tribute to moments, and that's how those lyrics developed. And I played them on acoustic guitar, and I just performed this song repeatedly on a solo tour. And I like the way it is on acoustic guitar, and it's much more open and expansive. And I think that's how we're going to perform it on the coming tour. So it probably will bear very little resemblance to the version that's on the record.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, so that's a little bit about that song.
So you mentioned the writing, and you also mentioned in the beginning that you kind of keep to yourself a lot. Did the isolation that the rest of the world had to endure it with COVID, did that affect you at all, or the writing for The Beggar?
I don't believe so. Maybe there's a certain amount of fatalism in the words that might have been informed by that. But when it comes to writing, I'm pretty self-contained.
Right.
I mean, events, topics, memories, books, cultural things, influence the writing, of course. But when I'm actually writing, I'm not thinking about what's going on in the outside world that much.
And since you write on your own, not having to connect with somebody physically, not having to write with somebody, didn't really have an effect on you either then?
No. I've been writing alone on the acoustic guitar since, 87 or something. I don't know.
I like the album art as well. And it seems to me like a fairly big departure from some of the previous Swans, Leaving Meaning specifically, but a lot of other Swans album art. There's definitely some humor to it, and it's brighter, and it's got everybody on there with their face on an animal. How did that whole thing develop?
Mark, I'm sorry, but it's entirely understandable that you would do this, but that is not the album art. That is... I asked Phil Paleo, who's our drummer. He's also a talented illustrator. We needed a band photo, and I thought I don't want to do some stupid fucking band photo again. I hate them. Oh. I hate rock, the whole world, and I don't want a bunch of mopes standing around. So I thought, well, how can we subvert that? And Phil does illustrations of people's pets for them. Oh. And I thought, well, why don't we just we'll each choose an animal, and we'll each send Phil a picture of our face, and Phil can just put our face on the animal, and then that'll be the band photo.
That is amazing. I love it.
So that's, yeah, I'm so divorced from the music business and all. I just don't give a shit at all anymore. I don't care about anything to do with it. I don't know anybody in the music business. So I thought, well, we have to have some kind of image that people can use. So let's just make this one up. So that's good.
It's brilliant. I love it. I'm just blown away by it. I think it's hilarious. So now I'm going to have to go look and see what the actual album art looks like, because I cocked that one up. But anyway. So,
well, they're, if you look at the, you can ask Howard to send it. Just the cover, it's a heart, but it's an illustration by my friend, Nicole Boydus. She's actually a tattoo artist now, but she did medical illustrations for a good part of her life. And so I had her illustrate just an iconic image of a heart, of lungs, of a prostate, and of a liver. Wow. And so each one sits on a panel, a panel of the record, and the record is that cardboard that we use lately.
Okay.
And so it's this it's black and white medical illustrations of these various internal organs.
Oh, okay, I have seen the heart. The artwork that I did see that stuck with me was the band quote unquote photo. So I do.
Yeah, that would have been a pretty audacious move, and maybe I should have done that. But.
Well, maybe the next one. Well, I know we're pretty much up on our time at this point, so I can't thank you enough for coming on again and talk to me and explaining as much as we could about, outside of my mistakes, about the album The Beggar. Thank you so much for all your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate it, Mark. I'm happy to talk about the music, and I very much appreciate that you're interested at all. Thank you very much.